Hi, I'm Josh McGrath.
I'm Andrew Haas.
And this is the Ardent Pursuit Podcast. Today we're going to discuss a topic that has evaded many a man over the years. We are going to unpack how to talk to women. And I believe that this is something that even our female listeners are going to be very grateful for. Andrew, it seems that over history, men have viewed women as a bit of an enigma. How does one approach them? How does one have a conversation with them? You know, it's like suddenly the norms of conversing, the way that we talk to one another, go out the window when a guy is thinking about approaching a woman that he doesn't really know and wants to begin a conversation with her.
Well, often, the stakes are so high, at least in our heads, because we really want this to work out. And it's something we really desire, at least we think we desire. And so, yes, we can get in our heads and the stakes become really high, even if artificially. But let's start with this idea of certainty, because a lot of men, I would say most men, desire certainty. In life, especially when it comes to women, especially in relationships, the unfortunate reality is that there is no certainty. But men often don't act. There's often inaction because there isn't certainty. And so we want to encourage men, we want to challenge men towards clarity, not necessarily certainty. You might not know where things will go or where things will end up. That doesn't matter. You still got to do something. And when it comes to women, when it comes to interacting with them, initiating conversation, move forward with clarity. Don't go into it with this assumption of certainty.
A lot of our culture today will discuss this idea of being, a confident man versus an insecure man. And, women will often say one of the things they notice first is confidence in a man. And so a lot of men today are trying to bolster themselves up with confidence, hype themselves up to be able to go, walk across the room and talk to that girl. And in today's culture, I think oftentimes we associate confidence as being this, Ryan Gosling and, Crazy Stupid Love type confidence, where he just shows up with his suave, debonair, swagger, and he can just pick up any woman in any environment. And the reality is, true confidence isn't based upon an ability to pick up women, but really comes from a grounding and understanding that you see people as valuable and you're not there for a specific outcome, but you're actually there to learn about them, to invest in them, whether that's a 20-second conversation, a 20-minute conversation, or, a 2-hour conversation.
And insecurity is really something for men to pay attention to, because not only do you want to just reduce insecurity in your own life, but when it comes to pursuing somebody, or at least initiating conversation with somebody, insecurity is easy to spot very quickly. And so guys should really be thinking about, I'm not interested in a specific outcome here, even if you are. I'm interested in a healthy outcome on the whole. Where's my life headed? And that's going to downplay the need for a specific outcome in the moment, where your insecurity might have you thinking, I need this to go a certain way. And so, don't go there. Think, okay, however this goes, good or bad, it doesn't matter. My life is going to work out. I have the ability and the confidence and the wherewithal to move forward, regardless of how this specific instance plays out.
That's true, because I think about, I'm very comfortable talking with any type of woman. It's very easy. But if you were to tell me, hey, Josh, go talk to this specific woman in order to try to secure a date with her, or in order to try to date her, I would suddenly be very nervous, because I would be thinking in terms of like, okay, I got to calculate the questions I'm asking and my, my stance and what am I saying? How am I coming across? Suddenly I'm like over-analyzing this thing, because I'm trying to work towards a very specific outcome. Versus if you're like, hey, go introduce yourself to her. I'm like, yeah, sure, easy, done. I can do that. And then organically, as you begin to converse, you might find out that like, wow, I really like you. And there are steps you can take, there are conversations you can have that will lead to a date or a dating relationship. But if you start out with the premise of being, I've got to be super confident because I want to win her over to date her, 9 times out of 10, for most men, you'll fail and you'll actually come across as either insecure or as a creep.
So what can guys do in these situations? Well, let's get very practical. He should start with his name. First name is fine. Eye contact, very important. A good handshake, very important. Unfortunately, those two, eye contact and handshakes, are lacking among men today. It's very unfortunate, but men need to have a good handshake, have eye contact, be able to maintain eye contact. These things are just either not practiced or just not encouraged, unfortunately.
It's funny because so often men will try to think of what is their opening line. What's the hook that they're going to use? And in reality, the best conversation starter is just saying, "Hi, I'm Josh." A smile, eye contact, outstretched hand, it's very inviting. Whereas if you're trying to figure out, the perfect pickup line or the perfect hook to really grab her attention, most often that will be something that she's just like rolls her eyes. Ugh, really? One of these? Or she's actually uncomfortable by it. And so she'll recoil and she'll shut down the conversation. And so we should not underestimate the power of just a simple introduction. I remember growing up as a child, one of the things that, my parents taught me and my siblings was just how to introduce yourself to an adult and then how to introduce other people to new people. "Hi, my name is Josh. Betty, this is my sister, Susie. Susie, this is Betty." And it was a way to learn proper etiquette in social environments, but also built a confidence and an ability so that as I grew and came of age, it's something that I continue to do to this day.
And something very important for guys to remember when thinking about initiating a conversation, don't hang off to the side if she's busy in conversation. If you see someone you'd like to meet and she's busy in conversation with somebody, don't just wait off to the side waiting for a break. Come back later. Or, there could be that tension where maybe it's a low-key conversation and you can approach, introduce yourself, don't interrupt. But you can initiate, find that balance, or just come back another time.
Like we already talked about, if you're going into that interaction with the plan of trying to pick her up, you're probably going to crash and burn. And there are, probably tens of thousands of accounts and, self-help books and other podcasts out there that are trying to teach men how to pick up women. Many of them are women giving practical advice to men on, here's the thing you say to her if you want to get her attention, compliment her hair or her outfit or her smile or something like that. And the problem with that recommendation is that it's creating an environment of pressure where you're trying to work towards a specific outcome. But if we just return back to a practice that was used for thousands of years, which is just get to know somebody, it's amazing how valuable that is today, how comfortable an environment that can create. And that actually ultimately offers some of the best moments of attraction because you're like, oh, you're a normal person who's just trying to get to know me, and I'm a normal person who's trying to get to know you. And we've talked about this before in the podcast, that the best relationships come out of friendships. And that's how you spark friendships, which then can create really long-lasting relationships.
And what should be at the forefront of every guy's mind in these situations is, what can I do to put her at ease? And we've touched on this in the past. Men should conduct themselves in a way that more easily makes a woman comfortable. And doesn't make it harder for her. And so, that's not always clear right away. Sometimes we don't know. We don't know her. We don't know how things are going to play out. But at least have that at the forefront of your mind. What can I do? What can I say? What can I not say? How can I conduct myself where she's more likely to be comfortable in it and at ease?
And it's amazing how far we've come from that. We're literally in a day and age where, men are dropping drugs in women's drinks to try to, take advantage of them, or are inappropriately touching them when they're engaging with them or saying inappropriate things to them. Literally, sexual harassment exists because men interacting with women. Like, we've come so far from putting her at ease, making her feel comfortable, respecting her as a culture. And so one of the things that we're always going to highlight here, we're going to harp on here, is the importance and the responsibility and role that a man has to make sure she feels comfortable, she feels safe, she doesn't feel pressure or being taken advantage of.
Yeah, you're not in it for what you can get out of it primarily. You certainly have desires and goals. You want to get to know her, but that can't be the leading thing. You can't just go into it with, I want to talk to her, I want to get to know her, I want to be close to her, I want to give her a hug. If it's all about you, you're going to crash and burn.
So let's talk about a principle that we're going to break down practically here in a second. And the principle is this: being a here I am person versus a there you are person. This might be a statement that some of our listeners are familiar with, and I'm going to explain it real quick. A here I am person is the type of person that walks into a room and is looking for the attention to be on them. It's a here I am, people, pay attention to me. And it's not necessarily a bold or outgoing personality, but it's the way that you present yourself. You could be a quiet introvert person who just sits in the corner, all huddled there by yourself, looking like a little wet puppy, trying to draw the attention so someone comes over and asks, oh, how's it going? You look sad. Is there anything wrong? And unfortunately, all too often in relationships, even in friendships, in society, people do this. You see it all the time on Facebook with people posting ridiculous statuses. It's a way to draw attention, to affix attention on oneself, regardless of the type of personality you are. Versus there you are type person. That's a person that walks into a room and instead of being like, here I am, put the attention on me, they're saying, oh, there you are. How's it going? Tell me about your day. What have you been up to? It's a person that, again, regardless of personality, is so focused on the other people in the room that there's no time for them to ask others to put attention on them. They want to know how others are doing. They want to lift up, cheer up, stir up others in the room rather than having the room focus on them.
And something that men, to that point, something that men need to be aware of, even in conversation, men can often dominate a conversation or be very, here I am. This is me, this is what I like, this is what I do, this is where I go. We love to talk about ourselves, that's fine. The problem is, it can be very dominating, it can become uninteresting. And the flip side of that coin too, don't be evasive, right? Be willing to share. If she asks questions, be willing to share. Don't be evasive. Don't be that like, oh, keep asking questions. Don't be like, don't play that like hard to get, right? That's just like, that's just gross. Yeah. So, the guys have to walk that line. Don't be too here I am. Don't be evasive.
So let's talk practically now. There are 4 categories of questions that every man should be ready to ask when he's beginning a conversation with a woman. So number 1 here, it's regarding that now moment, the environment that you're in, whether that's at church, at work, at school, maybe at a restaurant, a club, a bar, wherever you are, have a question ready about that environment that you can draw her into a conversation with. Number 2, a question that relates to her world. Where is she working? What is she studying? Things like that open up an opportunity to have a longer conversation. Number 3, a question that looks forward. So you learn maybe a little bit about, her life, what she's doing for work, what she's doing for school, maybe some of her interests. Now ask a question that relates to kind of looking forward. So you're going to school for, computer science. How do you hope to use that in the future? Or, maybe it's something like, hey, you're a doctor, working in pediatrics right now. Do you hope to stay at this hospital? Do you want to move to a different area? Do you want to ever do overseas medical care? Asking questions about the future, again, really helps to connect with her. And the 4th type of question is a question that looks backward at her past. So tell me a little bit about, where did you grow up? What was your family like? If she's going to school for science, ask her, was that something you were interested, as a young child? And so what you're doing is, these are just categories. There's a million questions that could be asked under each of these. But what they do is they provide a bit of framework so that as a man, you're not going into that conversation asking just stupid questions like, so what's your favorite Pokemon character? I mean, no offense to any of our Pokemon friends, but like, you want to ask questions that engage her,
Right.
and that make her feel comfortable, because boy, could you get inappropriate real quick.
Yes. Or even awkward. I mean, if you go in, hey, I want to find out what she's going to school for. So I'm going to ask, what college, what degree, and it turns out she's not going to college, or not yet, or not at all.
Yep.
Be ready to pivot. Adapt to the conversation. Don't just have the conversation end like, oh, okay.
Yep.
Right. You got to be able to like move forward even with all the nuances.
And as you're asking these questions and then she begins to respond, your posture, your facial expressions, they matter. Part of putting her at ease is looking like you're engaged with what she's saying in a way that makes her feel comfortable. So you're maintaining eye contact. The number of times, I'll have a conversation with somebody, guy or girl, and they're always like looking off, to the side or around.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you're not engaged. You're not present. You're not here in this moment. Or if you are, you're uncomfortable. Maintaining eye contact, again, don't give her the death stare. Blink, look away every now and again. But maintaining eye contact is really important. Smiling or making the appropriate facial gesture, depending upon what she's saying. If she's talking about something, really hard that she's going through, don't sit there and smile and nod. Oh yeah, nice. That's inappropriate. So obviously your face should mirror what she's saying. You should be actively listening, because if you actively listen to what she's saying, she might say something that's interesting that then you'll be able to build another question off of. And so your body language should demonstrate that you're interested. You should be open stance, not closed stance. If you're thinking the whole time, how do I connect relationally with her? How do I help her feel at ease? That will change your interaction from one of like, how do I win her over or pick her up, which will likely make her uncomfortable and turn her off, to one of where she's very open and receptive to learning about you, getting to know you. And now there's an opportunity for romance to bloom.
And under no circumstances do you pull out your phone if you start feeling awkward or uncomfortable. Guys need to learn how and practice working through something they might not be comfortable navigating.
Yeah.
But don't rely on a crutch to somehow try and make that better.
Yep.
Because it doesn't make it better.
And don't go into that conversation attempting to figure out her entire relationship history and current status.
Yes.
So now, is your boyfriend going to be joining us for this conversation? Like, oh my gosh, don't ask that question. Just get to know her. And any normal person who's trying to get to know another normal person, it's not weird if she is in a relationship or not in a relationship or married. Like,
right.
Two people getting to know each other, that happens millions of times a day all across the globe.
Yeah, it's probably healthy to get to know somebody even if she's married.
Yeah.
Right? That's not a non-starter.
Yeah, if the only time a single guy talks to a woman is if she's single and he wants to date her,
right.
You're gonna give a very bad first impression because you have no experience talking to women.
In fact, single guys probably should be talking to married women.
Absolutely.
Frequently.
Yes, for sure. And so men need to learn how to have a conversation with a woman in a way that prioritizes her and values her without the expectation that it's going to turn into a date. Yes. It may not. But I'll tell you, gentlemen, you have a much better chance of success if you prioritize her, getting to know her, rather than trying to pick her up. Now, when it comes to actually talking with a woman, we talked about kind of the 4 categories of questions men should be ready to ask. Men also need to be prepared to discuss things themselves.
Absolutely.
Right? You don't want the guy going in and only asking her questions and not talking about himself, because that's unnatural and it's weird, and she wants to get to know you just as much as you maybe want to get to know her. And so men need to have at least 3 topics that they are ready to talk about. And we're going to categorize these as surface, shallow, and deep. SSD, kind of like a hard drive.
There you go.
So this is a way that men can remember this. So surface, shallow, deep. So surface conversations that you are going to have and be ready to have deal with things like, pop culture, deals with, likes, dislikes, food, drink, travel, things like that, your interests. It's not particularly deep. It's very surfacey. It's a conversation you could have with anybody, anywhere, whether you're on a plane, a train, or in an automobile. So that's something that men need to be ready to have. But maybe you want to go a bit deeper because maybe your conversation is longer than 5 minutes. So now you have the ability to go from surface to shallow. And shallow is going to include things like, work, your studies, your family, kind of, your community, your social life. It's a bit deeper. Now, if you are continuing the conversation, it's going really, really well. Now you have the opportunity to go deep. And when we say deep, we don't mean intimate.
Right.
Deep
Important distinction.
Exactly. We're talking about kind of the depth of the topic. And so now we're talking things like theology, politics, worldview, convictions. So men need to have a topic ready for each of these categories, surface, shallow, and deep, that they're ready at a moment's notice, should the conversation be going well, to have with a woman.
Because ultimately, it is those deeper conversations, as we call them. Again, they're not emotional. You're not drawing each other out, but they're more meaningful.
Yep.
And those are really the conversations that will build trust and build friendship, build a relationship. It's important for guys to remember that surface conversations, surface questions aren't really there for their own sake. Asking her favorite something, or those superficial questions, they're not so much there to just gather, information about the person, but more to, facilitate interaction. You can laugh, or joking, or the body language, how you communicate. That's actually the more important part. And you don't want to stay there. If you just stay on the superficial, if you just stay on the surface for a while, it's actually going to wear thin, and that's just you're going to both be worse off for that.
It's true. You need the surface conversations in order to go into the shallow conversations. But then you're going to need those shallow conversations to lead you into the deep conversations. And if you start in the deep conversations, 99.9999% of the time, the woman's going to be uncomfortable or creeped out. Rightfully so. But if you're spending, weeks or months hanging out, and you're still talking about pop culture, your favorite food, your favorite drink, your interests, well, that's also a problem, because you haven't gone deeper in your relationship, in your conversation with one another. And so what men need to be able to do is, in real time, gauge what is appropriate. And this is probably where men tend to fail the most, is being able to gauge well that moment. But today's conversation is not unpacking that. Today is very practical. We're looking at, tools that you can, put in your tool belt that you have access to. But men need to be aware that just because you have a tool doesn't mean that tool should be used in every instance. Men need to know, learn, grow to utilize the appropriate tool in the appropriate context. But today, we just want to make sure you at least have the tools.
Yes. And something else that men need to keep at the forefront is not to dominate the conversation. For too many men, of course, not all men, but for a lot of men, dominating the conversation is a temptation. And while we do have things that we're passionate about, things that we're interested in, don't go there. Don't dominate the conversation. Be aware of how much you're talking. Be aware of how much she's talking. Find that balance. Be aware of the time. Know how long you've been talking. And this is a lot of background processing. Think wow, this is like a huge juggling act. Well, yeah, it is. As a guy, learn to handle these things.
Yes.
Learn to handle yourself. Learn to have, be thinking about multiple things. How am I conducting myself? What am I saying? What is she saying? Am I too close? Am I too far? This is what a guy has to do. The more that a guy takes on, the less she'll have to take on. And that's really the goal. We want her to be comfortable. We want her to be at ease to the best that we can. It's also important for a guy to be the one to end the conversation. That is, of course not always, but that should be the goal. A guy should go in, initiating the conversation, and also have a plan to end the conversation.
I love that because so many men will just keep talking or standing awkwardly until such a moment as she concludes it. But part of, being a man is being an initiator and a leader. And so even if this is not, a setting where it's going to turn into a romantic relationship, you as the man need to be able to lead that conversation in a way where when it's time for it to be over, you're ready to end it. And that leads into our final point here, which is men need to have an exit strategy. Before they even begin that conversation, they need to be aware of how am I going to end this conversation? And there's a couple different ways you can do that. One can just be like, hey, if you loved talking with her and it was great to meet her, and you're like, yeah, we're probably not going to talk again. End it with something like, hey, it was so nice meeting you. I enjoyed our conversation. I hope to see you around sometime, or I hope to see you again soon. It's just a very simple way of just concluding the conversation. Or, hey, thanks so much for chatting with me today. It was a pleasure getting to know you. And if you've learned a little bit about her life, I wish you well on, whatever you're doing next. It's a very simple way to bring it to a close. Now, maybe there is some interest there. And if there's interest there, you want to have an action plan with regards to what next steps will entail. So maybe one of them is, it was so great chatting with you today. Loved it. I'm actually getting together with some friends, on Tuesday night for dinner. We're going out to the steakhouse. We'd love to have you join us. So again, it's an opportunity to acknowledge that you've enjoyed the conversation, but then there's an action step where you're inviting her to something. Or another thing that you could do easily is say, hey, it was so great chatting with you today. I'd love to introduce you to my friends, Sally and Bob.
That's a great one.
And what you do is you enlarge her circle of community by bringing her into yours. And now you guys got some mutual friends that you can begin to spend time with. And again, it's a low pressure ask. I'd love to introduce you to some of my friends. So having something ready as a man to conclude the conversation or to conclude with an action step is so important before you walk across that room to start that conversation with a woman.
So important. And one clarifier too about guys starting and ending conversations. We encourage men to start and end the conversation. We're not saying women can't start or end the conversation.
Of course.
I could probably hear women saying, "What, you think I can't end a conversation?" By all means, if a guy starts a conversation and she wants to end it,
end it,
right? Just the burden or expectation should not necessarily be placed on the woman to do that. If she wants to do it, great. But we're saying the guy needs to be ready and willing to do that.
And I can't emphasize enough the importance of men just having conversations with women on a regular basis, whether that's at church, at work, maybe you're part of a book club, hiking club, board game club. When you talk with women without the pressure of trying to pick them up, it kind of just demystifies them and you see them just as a real person. I think we talked about in the last episode the idea of Wonder Woman and the fact that she comes from the Amazonian women and they're all on this island that no one can find. I think too often men view women as this unique thing where they're like, I don't know, how do you talk to her? How do you have conversations with her? What is she like? What is she not like? And they can get in their own head, they can psych themselves out, and they can miss the fact that she's just a real person.
Yeah, and I've experienced this too with, even with guys who are in certain fields like, sales. They can look at every new person they meet as a potential client. And, for guys, they can get into this rut of, I'm going to funnel the conversation this way because this might be a potential customer here.
Sure.
And I think guys do that with women. When we're meeting women for the first time, it's like that we have this gravitational pull toward making the conversation something where we want there to be like some future outcome.
Yeah.
But it's like, hold on. I mean, maybe, but just start, just become friends.
Yeah.
And you know, not like super deep friends. Like we're just talking about just get to know them.
That's a great example. And what I think is so funny about that is, you know, when you're single, the mindset that you can easily fall into is like, you know, is she someone I could date or is she someone I could marry? But guess what? If you get married at some point, you're not going into every conversation with a woman thinking, is she someone I could date or I could marry?
Exactly.
Like at some point, that's going to stop. And why not begin now with the practice of guarding your heart, guarding your mind, and viewing her not as a potential person to date or marry, but just as a person to get to know?
Yeah, and the crazy reality to that point is that if you, as a guy, if you practice, if you orient yourself toward every woman that I meet could be a potential partner, when that becomes the norm over the years and then you eventually get married, it actually, those patterns need to change, but you're actually making it harder to change them. And the unfortunate reality is that in marriage, it's likely for a lot of guys, as they meet new women, that's gonna be like this subconscious, low key, when I engage with women, you're going to naturally or, you know, unintentionally communicate, I want to get to know you as more than a friend. When actually, no, that's not what you're doing. That's just the muscle memory.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of bad habits you're gonna have to break. If that's what you practice beforehand, you're gonna make that harder to change those things after you're married.
That is so good. Okay, gentlemen, so there are 3 things we want you to do this week. Number 1, remember the 4 categories of questions you should be ready to ask a woman? Well, you need to go through and this week actually write out what those questions are. We didn't give the specific questions, we just gave the categories. Number 2, remember there are 3 topic conversations that you should be ready to have at all times. They should be surface, they should be shallow, and then they should be deep. And so you need to identify what are those conversations that I'm gonna be ready to have should I be talking with a woman. And finally, number 3, have an exit strategy. You actually need to know the specific wording that you're going to use to conclude a conversation that you're having with a woman. Regardless of whether it's going great or it's going terribly, you need to be the one ready to initiate that closing, and you need to know the words that you're going to say. As always, we love having you here on the Art and Pursuit podcast, and we look forward to having you here next time.